The J-League is the top professional soccer league in Japan. Founded all the way back in 1992, with its first season being played in 1993 with 10 professional clubs. MLS, or Major League Soccer, is the top professional soccer league in the United States of America. Founded all the way back in 1993 with its first season in 1996, also with 10 teams. But outside of that, what do these leagues have in common? What do they have that is different about them? What has one done right and the other has done wrong? Which has done a better job with youth development? Which one is simply better or more competitive? Are they the most watched professional soccer leagues in their own country? Well, lucky for you, we are going to be addressing all of these questions today here in this video. And I say lucky for you because if you clicked in this video, you're probably interested in the J-League and MLS. Hi, if you're new here, I'm Filippo, and welcome to Tactical Manager TV, and welcome to episode 2 of this 2-episode mini-series about U.S. soccer and Japanese soccer. Episode 1, we mainly talked about the national teams, the U.S. men's national team and the Japanese national team, and how they're projecting towards the 2026 World Cup. So you can check that episode out. It's been released already. Today, we have an episode to talk about both domestic leagues, the J-League and MLS, and we're going to be addressing all of those questions that I mentioned earlier in this video. And for this one, we will bring back Dan Orlowitz, an American journalist in Japan, an expert in Japanese soccer, and very knowledgeable in US soccer and MLS as well. Essentially, what I'm doing here is I'm trying to hype the living crap out of Dan Orlowitz. He is the perfect guest for this video. And I'm not saying it just because he's here, because he's not even looking at this recording right now. He is the perfect guest for this video. So sit back, relax, hit the like button because I told you to do so and because it's free, and let us know in the comment section of this video if you watch MLS or the J-League, and if you do watch MLS or the J-League, which team from these leagues do you support, and tell us why. I'm actually going to be quite shocked if someone on this channel specifically watches the J-League. Hopefully there is someone that watches the J-League that watches this video, but I'll just be very surprised. With that said, let's bring in Dan Orlowitz and start the episode. Okay, everyone, welcome to part 2 with Dan Orlowitz once again. I'm not going to say hi to him or introduce him because we never left. We actually never left. This is just part 2 of the recording. And now we're going to focus on Major League Soccer and the J-League. I'm pretty sure most people watching this are very familiar with MLS. I'll obviously throw a few things here and there, just information and context that will be needed. But I want to focus more on the J-League because that's something I don't know much about. Most people in the U.S. don't know much about. And just so everyone can know, the J-League was founded all the way back in 1992, and its first season was in 93 with 10 clubs. MLS was founded in 93. The first season of MLS was 96, also with 10 teams. So there's a lot of things that are similar between these leagues, and you even called them, I think last time we recorded in 2022, you called them cousin leagues or something?
I think sort of, if not siblings separated at birth, then definitely cousins. I mean, slightly different circumstances in terms of why they were formed. I think that MLS was, in many ways, a condition for the U.S. hosting the World Cup in '94. I think just the idea that if you're going to host the World Cup, you should have a professional league. And the J-League was formed to help strengthen the Japanese national team and get Japan to the World Cup, which they hadn't qualified for at the time. So, I think both were birthed from the sense of wanting to do better at the World Cup and wanting to build soccer in countries that weren't necessarily receptive to soccer, although Japan does have a history in the game going back to the late 1800s. So, the foundation was there. It just didn't have the professional backing until the 90s.
Question that everyone's going to want to know, Dan. Does the J-League have an open pyramid unlike MLS? For anyone that doesn't know, MLS obviously is like a classic American sports league. It's franchises. There's no promotion relegation. The franchises are there. They could change their location, but they're just there, the franchises with the league. How does the J-League work? Is it an open pyramid? Are they clubs more like Europe? Is it done the Japan way? tell us that, because most of us don't know.
So yes, they are clubs, independently owned, some by companies, some with sort of citizen club type ownership systems where the municipalities each own a share in the club. Some have a very distributed sponsorship model. This is getting really into the weeds on the sports business side, so I won't dive too far unless you want to follow up. But to answer the main question, yes, we do have ProRel across the 3 divisions of the J League, which are, as of right now, 20 teams each. There is a bit of a gate in that in order to qualify for promotion, you need the license for the higher division. And the licenses are evaluated every season, and that's based on the financial capabilities, how your staffing is, whether you have the right facilities. There are all these gigantic checklists that you can in fact just look up, and if you want to see how close your MLS club is to qualifying for a J1 club license, it'd be kind of interesting to see that if we could sit down with that list sometimes. But
do teams with baseball stadiums qualify?
What teams with baseball stadiums?
New York City
I
FC.
mean, no, well, I mean, right. I was thinking in Japan, obviously, we don't have that. I mean, we do still have a number of clubs that play at athletic stadiums with running tracks, which isn't always the best. But for example, all of our clubs have grass pitches.
We don't. We have turf, a lot of turf.
Even Consadole Sapporo play. Wow, sorry. Let me pause to take a drink because my throat is shockingly lurgy today. Yeah, so all of our teams play on grass. Maybe 1 or 2 J3 teams have a sub-ground or something. Even Consadole Sapporo play in the Sapporo Dome. And I don't know if you've ever seen it, but the pitch actually slides out of the stadium so that they can grow it and maintain it. Then it slides back in on game day. It was built for the 2002 World Cup. So you can go onto YouTube and find like the time lapse of that happening and then converting it for soccer or baseball or even rugby in 2019. So we have had some issues in the past where a team that was applying for a license to a higher division didn't get it, and therefore they were ineligible for promotion. Machi Delvia in 2018 was sort of the biggest example, but what happened was they were purchased by CyberAgent, a big digital media company. They renovated the stadium, they built a clubhouse and a training ground, they invested into the team, and last year they won the J2, and and this year they'll be playing in the J1 for the first time. So we have pro-rel between the 3, and there is limited pro-rel between the JFL, which is the National Amateur League, and the J3. It's in theory. We haven't had it happen yet. It depends on whether the clubs have a J3 license, where they finish in the JFL, what their average attendance is. So they have to clear a bunch of hurdles before they can do that sort of pro-rel. But in theory, it's all there. And certainly between J1 and J3, we have basically full throttle pro-rel.
So it's not a franchise fee like MLS. Obviously, MLS also has standards for that. It's just standards. It's like if you're going to be in the first division, you need to have, you need to check a few boxes here and there, so you're at the standard. I'm pretty sure I don't know every league, but the Premier League had that, because they were even saying that Luton Town might not meet some of the standards when they got promoted. Obviously, they did, and they're there, but every league has that. So it seems more like a European pyramid. Very similar, a lot of similarities with the structure with it.
It's a lot of things like governance. You have to have your auditing and everything and compliance all have to be in order. You need an under 18, under 15, and I believe for J1 you need an under 12 team. You need schools set up. The J1 license is basically these days they're just using the AFC license. So if your club is qualified to participate in continental competition, then you are good to have a J1 license. If your club is not quite at that level, then you can get the J2 license. And if for a number of recent clubs, they have the J3 license, which is basically lets you join the J League and play in the J3, but you do need to up your game in order to be eligible to earn promotion to the J2, and that can mean stadium capacity. Again, having your own training ground, not just renting or switching between training grounds, which a lot of the lower level clubs do in the J League. So we're getting to the point where just about I think something like 40 or 45 out of the 60 J League clubs do have J1 licenses. So we're really not that far from everyone, in theory, being eligible to get all the way to the top. And I think a lot of clubs that don't have J1 licenses, they're trying to measure their growth sustainably so that by the time they are ready on the pitch to earn promotion, they will be ready off the pitch to get that license.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So that would be the first division, second division, and third division. And some teams, I'm assuming they're mostly in the third division, the ones that are trying to get the license. I'm assuming first division, obviously, all of them have it. And probably most of them in the second division have it as well. But anyhow, we don't have to go into those details. It doesn't matter too much. Here's another good question. One is just a yes or no. Does Japan have a domestic cup?
Yes, so we have the Levain Cup, which is the League Cup, and then we have the Emperor's Cup, which is the FA Cup.
Emperor Cup. That sounds cool.
Emperor's Cup, yeah. So the Emperor's Cup, the original trophy, so it started in, I think, 1921 or thereabouts, but the England Football Association saw some news report, thought that Japan had started a national cup competition, and commissioned a trophy that they sent to the Japan Football Association. And the Japan Football Association gets this trophy and thinks, oh, well, there's been a misunderstanding, but as long as we have this trophy, we should start an FA Cup. And so that's what they did. And so that's how we got
Dude,
the Emperor's Cup.
I just know that that's a badass name, Emperor's Cup. Like that.
Sure, we have an emperor, and actually, every major sport tends to have an Emperor's Cup in it. In sumo, that's what gets awarded to the winner of each grand tournament. I believe basketball has an Emperor's Cup. I don't think rugby or American football have one. But yes, yeah. I mean, the royal family, the imperial family, I should say, are tremendous patrons of sport in Japan. Mm-hmm. So they have their name attached to a lot of different trophies and stadiums.
That's awesome. And then next up, I have a question here for you. Is the J League, and I know this is a tricky question. You've told me this off air a few weeks back. Is the J League the most watched soccer league in Japan? And let me just clarify to anyone watching this that might not know, why am I asking him this? Because if you're from Brazil or if you're from England or Germany, you're just going to call me an idiot for asking it. It's a silly question. But in the United States of America, MLS is actually the third most watched league. The first one being Liga MX, the Mexican league. Second being the Premier League. By views, I mean like TV viewership, right? Ratings. And then MLS comes right after. It's a bit different. Most of the countries, their domestic league is the most watched league for most of the countries. But like we said, the J League also is a young league, just like MLS. It's not 100 years old like the Premier League, or sorry, the leagues in Europe, the clubs in Europe, the ones in Brazil, and etc. So is it the most watched league in Japan?
Yes. We don't really have recent viewing numbers, TV and whatnot, because I think in this streaming generation, all of the streaming services keep their numbers very, very close to the vest. But yeah, the reality is, of course, in Japan, you have to fight with time zones. The Premier League kickoffs, the earliest we get them can be 8 o'clock at night, sometimes 10 o'clock at night. But the Champions League takes place at 3, 4 in the morning. Not really ideal unless you're a really hardcore fan. You're probably not getting up to watch it. And you look at J League attendance in person. 2019 average per game attendance in the J1 crossed 20,000 for the first time. I think last year MLS was about 21,000.
MLS has good
I
average attendance for stadiums. It's
good
good.
good average attendance, and last year our average attendance was about 19,000 in the J1, and that's because of obviously we were coming back from COVID. Our pandemic related restrictions loosened a lot later than the rest of the world. Japan was very cautious in that respect, and last year was in many ways it was a celebratory season because it was the league's 30th anniversary. This year, I think that there's the league feels very positive about where it is. We're going to have more games at the national stadium this year. I think that they've discovered that actually holding more games in Tokyo at the national stadium, even if the teams aren't local, they're finding that more and more fans, more and more first-time fans who go to those games are going to a second game and a third game after that. So the league knows what it's doing in terms of fan development, in terms of marketing. It's done a lot of catch up, and it's also had to figure out how to promote in this sort of new normal. The pandemic changed a lot of ways that clubs do business, that the league does business, and they've gotten really smart in terms of their marketing, in terms of their data collection, in terms of their analysis. So to answer your question, yes, I think the J League is the most popular. It's the second most popular team sport in Japan. Baseball is king, but professional baseball also has a 40 or 50 year head start on professional soccer here. So we're seeing that, yes, baseball is going to keep being dominant, but are they getting new fans? Are they expanding their audience? It's kind of hard to do that, especially when baseball is starting to suffer from the same issues that soccer has had for a while, which is all of the good players are starting to go overseas. All the good players are starting to go to the US, and even strong high school players, instead of going into the draft, they're going to play in the NCAA on scholarship. So we're going to see how things go, but I don't think that it's not a question of, well, either baseball or Japan has to, it's not a question of someone has to win or someone has to lose. I think it's just about soccer finding its place here and continuing to expand that base. And so far, it's doing a really good job of that.
I mean, if it's number 2 there, from what you said, at least the league, that's much better than the US, because the US, I mean, baseball's ahead, basketball's ahead, football is king
Football is
here.
ahead of everyone.
Yeah.
It's,
NFL is,
I mean, MLS is a strong, maybe number 4, depending on how you view ice hockey. It is a very regional thing, but I think that if you're looking at it less as leagues and in terms of cultures, I think that soccer has found its way. The US has figured out after all this time, after these 30 years or so, that yes, there is room in American hearts for soccer. It may not be American soccer, but it's there. I think the fact that you look at CBS's coverage of the Champions League and just how good, you'd never imagine that an American broadcaster could do such a good job covering a European soccer competition.
Yeah, I was going to say European. They did a terrible job covering the Asian Cup.
I mean, yes, and I don't want to pull, we can have a separate episode about that.
Yeah.
That book is far from being written, but I think that there is that Eurocentricity, and there is that sort of shadow fandom of Mexican soccer being the most popular league in the US. And I think that's just a crazy set of geopolitical circumstances that no other country in the world can quite claim to match. But soccer's done very well in Japan. You mentioned that the J League started in 93 was the first season with 10 clubs. We're up to 60. That's an insane amount of growth, and it's all been done in a very sustainable way that has allowed almost all of those clubs to expand and build their base and flourish.
Yeah, and moving on, I would honestly love to talk to you about Japanese soccer for hours, ask about rivalry so much, and hopefully one day I go to Japan and then it's like, hey, let's go out for a
you
beer.
were talking about it. I hope you'll get out there. I'll tell that exchange rate.
I want to. I'm hoping to go by next year. I talked to you about it. I talked to Tom Byer about it. I'm gonna go. I'm a Pokemon fanatic. I love a lot of things about Japan. I'm going to go. And when I go, we're going to go out for a beer and you're just going to like, dude, let's just talk about soccer. I want to understand what goes on here. I'm just going to pick your brain, but not for this episode, because now I want to dive into something that relates a lot to the U.S. men's national team, MLS, youth development. When we talked about in a previous episode, we talked about how Japan and the U.S. men's national team, on paper, it's very similar. It's close. You could say a little bit Japan's a little bit better. Some people can argue the U.S., and we're never going to – it's not clear. It's not like comparing to Brazil or France. It's very close. But here's the thing. If I remove the U.S. men's national team players developed abroad, it's no longer close. Japan is much better. What do I mean by that? Let's get the U.S. men's national team. Remove A-Rob, the left back from Fulham. Remove Yunus Musa, Serginho Dest, Floating Balogun. I can keep going. Johnny Cardoso. There's multiple players from the U.S. men's national team, Malik Tillman, that are dual nationals. Some are locked starters. And if not, they're right there. They increase our depth, our quality. They're great players. And then I don't think the U.S. is clear if you remove all of these guys. And I want to say one thing, too. Christian Pulisic, sure, American player, developed in the U.S., but he wasn't developed by an MLS academy. So it was an unconventional development path that is not normal in the United States. So even Pulisic, I would have to kind of remove from this equation if we want to be fair and go developed by the domestic leagues, whether it is USL, MLS, whatever. So with that said, the leagues were made around the same time. Why, or correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like Japan is doing something better with youth development. Am I right or am I wrong about that? And if yes, can you tell us what is the path to become? Do you guys use high schools, colleges? Do you have academies? How does it work?
Everything. We have everything. And so the answer is yes. I think Japan does youth development better. I think so. At the origin story of youth development is that, yes, it started with high schools. The oldest ongoing national competition in Japan is the All Japan High School Soccer Tournament, which I believe was started in, I could wiki this, but I think it was started in like 1917 or something like that. That's how long we've had national high school competitions here. And traditionally, once the J League started, a lot of those that was the pipeline. You play well in high school, you get scouted, you join it, you go pro. You can also, if you decide that you need more time to develop for whatever reason, you can go to university, and Japan is a very strong university system, and graduate and go pro. Once the J League started, clubs did start to, they all essentially were creating youth academies from scratch. They may have had an under 8. They might have had an under 18 team or something. It was very rare, but it did take time to figure that out. And these days, again, as I said when I was talking about licensing, that's all requirement now. Like you need an under 18 side just to join the J League. And to get that higher level license, you do need an under 15. I think under 15 and under 12 are requirements for J1. So you have most J League clubs, they will run schools for like elementary school kids. And they'll have a number of different locations and basically franchise those out. And those feed into the under 12s or the under 15s. And then they'll have one under 18 academy. And there's a lot of kids who they'll either some will graduate from the under 18s and go pro. Some will go to college and then graduate from university and then go pro. We are starting to see some kids go straight out of academy or high school and go to Europe, because I think European clubs they know that Japan is really underrated. I won't say underrated, but there's so much talent coming out, and it's so much cheaper to sign these kids compared to signing 18-year-old phenoms out of Brazil, for example. So we have that pipeline, and now J League clubs are spoiled for riches at this point because they can look at the high school level, they can look at the university kids, they can look at what other academies are doing. They have their own academies. There's a system that the JFA has set up where you can actually play for a university team and also be registered to a J League team and not lose your academic eligibility. So that lets you train with the first team. And what you'll find a lot of the time is that college or high school players will set that up, and that might be part of a commitment or a letter of intent where they intend to sign a pro contract after they graduate. But they're getting in those reps earlier. Sometimes they're even getting appearances earlier, and they're at least getting used to the first team environment. So the J League has done a really good job of creating this youth pipeline. You look at, the academies are producing fantastic players. The high schools are still less so than before, and if you're counting number of high school players or players with a high school background in the national team, but still it's roughly about a 50-50 split right now. And
Dan, one question. Sorry to interrupt. These players that you're talking about that go from high school and play for the national team or play professionally, do they happen to train just with the school, or they train with the academy and play for the high school? Is there any overlap?
It depends on usually if you're playing for your high school team, you're playing for your high school team. You may, generally, like you can be registered as a type 2 player, but generally either it's one or the other. There might be circumstances in which you are playing for the high school team, but you're also maybe training with the clubs under 18s or even the first team, but it's not a daily everyday thing. And it's important when I talk about some of these elite high school programs, I'm talking about schools that have sponsorships. Like, they aren't just buying their uniforms from my Nike or Adidas. Like, they have supplier agreements with Adidas or Nike or Hummel.
Are they extremely competitive? Is that because what I'm wondering here is
I'll give one example, like Higashi Fukuoka, who are perennial contenders and won the national tournament 6 or 7 years ago, maybe more recently as well. They have 200 players in their soccer club, and the teams they have teams that compete in the regional level, prefectural level, city level B, freshman league, and there's a constant that they have internal pro rel where players are moved up and down based on their performance. Can you imagine a U.S. high school team with 200 players that are all fighting for a spot on the first team?
No. What I'm getting out of what you're saying quite a bit is soccer's overly more popular in Japan than it is in the United States. Was that a fair assessment?
I think it's a fair assessment. Certainly, if you're looking at the youth level, I'll even throw in this anecdote, which every year there are these sort of like recruitment agencies and sort of that sort of company who do surveys, and they survey elementary school kids. And the question they ask is, what job do you want when you grow up? They're asking you elementary school and junior high kids. And for the last decade, the number one sport has been pro soccer player among boys.
In the US, it's TikTok influencers, but
right. And I think that recently TikTok influencer overall has been at the top of the chart. But if you're looking at sports, baseball versus soccer, kids want to be soccer players. They want to be Kaoru Mitoma. They want to be Takumi Minamino. They want to be Keisuke Honda and Shinji Kagawa. They want to play at that level. And I think for now, with Japan's recent success at the World Baseball Classic, with Shohei Ohtani doing what he did in LA, what he's going to keep doing in LA, just with different colors this season, maybe you'll see an uptick of kids who want to be baseball players this year. But if you're looking at the legacy of the J League in 30 years, playing professionally has gone from, it used to be just playing as a professional was the dream. Now, going to Europe, playing for a big club, winning the World Cup for Japan isn't just the dream, but it's something that is like achievable. They've seen that you can go play in the Premier League, you can go play in La Liga, you can not just play in La Liga, but get signed by a big club. You can play for Bayern, you can play for Lazio or even Roma if you're on the women's team, or it's no longer a fantasy.
Yeah, it's been. I'm learning more about Japanese soccer as we talk, but when you mentioned the whole thing about high school, it just reminded me of how much more popular it is. Because in the United States, you're not going to get that amount of kids in a high school soccer team. It's not going to happen, especially because there's so many more sports that kids play, and soccer is usually not the top priority. We basically develop players these days in the US, mostly, I would say, from the MLS academies, USL academies, and then college still plays a minor role here and there. I'm talking about now, right? They're going to bring
Sure.
up like Clint Dempsey and all that, but I'm talking
Even
about now.
Orlando City drafted a couple Japanese players this past fall. I forget their names escape me, but they came to the US and went to to play college ball there.
College soccer, yes. So drafted.
And now they're that they're signed to MLS squads, which is pretty cool. I don't know if they're going to get first team minutes this season. And of course you had Tsubasa Endo, who was, I believe, the first Japanese player to be picked in the Super Draft, and he went to Maryland, and then he was drafted by Toronto and played there, and he's, I hope, hopefully he's doing well. He's fighting leukemia at the moment and going through chemo and all that, but he played for, I think he played for Galaxy too, and he's played in Australia as well. So it's the youth pathways that Japan have are not only really diverse, but they're really built up to the point where it really doesn't matter where you're coming from. You're gonna, if you're jumping to the pros, you're going to be at that level. And I think that the next step that we see is going to be players jumping from the high school level straight to Europe. And we saw that with Andeye Chase, who played in high school for Shoshi High School, who are very strong very strong high school program, and he got signed straight to Stuttgart. And now he's playing for the.
Is he the center back?
Yeah, the big afro.
Yeah, I know who he is.
Yeah. Which and he is, I think, still technically. He hasn't played for the senior team. He's trained with the senior team, but he does have an American passport still. So his mom is Japanese. His dad is American of Jamaican descent. So, if Berhalter is watching, there is that sort of question, would the U.S. make a move for him? But I do think he wants to play for Japan. So
Berhalter's probably not watching, but I'm sure someone from U.S. Soccer might be watching. And if they are, he just gave you. There's only so much you can do if the player wants to play for Japan. He wants to play for Japan, but it doesn't hurt to give him a call. It's like, hey, man, would you want to? I don't know.
You look. If you, one of the things I'm really excited about in terms of how the Japan national team is developing is the number of biracial players who are coming up the pipeline and starting to really be integrated into the national team. Obviously, we had Zion Suzuki in goal for Japan at the Asian Cup. And, he's American. Daniel Schmidt, who has been in the goalkeeper picture for a while, is also I believe born in Iowa or Idaho, one of the eyes. One of the eyes. He was eligible, but now they're both cap tied. So we've got them. Leo Brian Kokobo, who's playing in Portugal right now. A lot of and what I like about that is that I think it does show how Japan is obviously a very homogenous country.
Mhm.
Like 97.8% of the country is Japanese, or 98% is Japanese. But soccer and minority representation in soccer is actually pretty progressive if you
Didn't
think
Japan
about
have a
just.
Brazilian player 15 years ago or something?
Well, yeah, so we had, obviously there's a huge Japanese population in Brazil, and so there's a lot of mixed. There were a lot of mixed Japanese Brazilian players who came over in like the 90s and the early 2000s. Marcus Tulio Tanaka was a big
Yeah.
defender, and he really excelled at the 2010 World Cup. Before then, you had Rui Ramos. You had Alex Santos, who eventually took Japanese citizenship and played it in, I think, 2002 and 2006, and he stayed in the J League for most of his career. So that background is there, but like now you're getting these kids with African parents, with American parents, with like it is a very cool amount. It's, I don't want to like bring in like a DEI debate into this, but like it is really cool to see it. And I think it shows how, again, it shows how progressive Japanese soccer is, especially compared to Japanese baseball, where you rarely see mixed race players. And I think that may help the physicality gap as we go forward, especially at goalkeeper, if you're talking about height and wingspan.
Mhm.
So like if you look at the fact that the two of the last three starters between the posts for Japan have been have had foreign parents, non-Japanese parents, it shows you where things are going.
Because
So
the average height in Japan is lower. It's not a
yeah,
very
it is.
tall
It
population.
is lower. I
Yeah,
mean, we do have tall players, but
yeah.
like it is definitely lower than it is in the States. And I think that dealing with sort of physicality is something Japan has always struggled with in the past. But now you have players who are much bigger going to Europe and putting on muscle and learning how to play against physical clubs. And like
Mhm.
Zion Suzuki is 6'3". He's not exactly like he's not ready to start in the NBA,
Mhm.
but you look at his presence in goal and like you need that big man in goal. So it's we're getting not just a variety of players and from a variety of different youth setups, but like the diversity in our player pool is growing, and it's only going to keep growing.
Now, Dan, just to close the episode, one quick question. I know you are familiar enough with MLS to possibly answer this. In terms of level of competitiveness, and I guess like level of the players, do you think MLS has more quality than the J League right now? Because MLS definitely has more money, like signing. Like, I'll put it
Mhm.
this way: the J League doesn't have Messi, for example, right?
Yeah.
That's something MLS. So obviously that plays a role. MLS seems to actually attract big names. The J League, it's more of like, I guess, your local there. There's big signings here and there, but MLS can pull off a David Beckham,
Mhm.
Zlatan Ibrahimovic, Lionel Messi.
Sure.
Do you think MLS is a I think youth network or youth development, I do think the J League is doing a better job. Part of it too is because the sport is more popular in Japan, so that does benefit the J League. But I do think they're doing a better job right now. Is MLS more competitive? I think it is, but I don't watch the J League enough. I'm just guessing based on how much money they spend.
I mean, it's like I don't think that spending money is related to performance. Like I think if you look at Vissel Kobe, who won the J1 last year, they spent they spent millions and millions and millions of dollars on Andres Iniesta. He was pulling in like $30 million a year, but did they win? But they didn't win the league title with him. It wasn't until he left that they sort of realized the real Iniesta was inside us all along, and they won that league with a very strong squad of Japanese players at its core, mostly former internationals. You had Yuya Osako, Yoshinori Muto, Hotaru Yamaguchi, Like, of course, Gotoku Sakai, whose mother is also half German. Speaking of dual nationals, or his mother is German, but he would have been German eligible. I think he was born in New York, so he was technically been eligible to play for for the U.S. men. But tangent aside, I just saw Messi and company play here last week. I was not impressed until Messi came onto the pitch. Inter Miami were a hot mess, and quite frankly, it was sort of the same thing that we saw when Iniesta played here. His first couple seasons with Vissel, like, yes, those are singular players who can change the face of the game, but can they do it week in, week out with a squad that wasn't, it's Messi and friends, it's not a team. And if every MLS club was like that, I mean, would it really be a league worth taking seriously? I don't know. I think that the clubs that win the MLS Cup, some of it is about money, but some of it is also just about building an amazing squad and the coaching and everything that goes into it. And we saw that last year. In terms of competitiveness, when it's the same 30 teams, is it 30 teams, 28, 26?
We're at 30. We're at 30
we're
now.
30.
Or it's going to be 30 with San Diego when they join.
It's guys, it's the same teams year in, year out. And they're, playing the same unbalanced schedules, playing the same, this Leagues Cup bullshit, which
don't
like they're playing a ton of games, but like, is it real serious competitive soccer as the Lord intended? I don't know. Obviously, like,
I don't
MLS,
think it is. I think the quality is very high compared to what it once was.
The quality is high, but like, if you win the league, then you get to go play in the Asian Champions League, which we take very seriously. And, we have 3 teams in the round of 16 right now. So there is a clear, it's about being the best in Japan and then being the best in Asia and then wanting to be the best in the world. And you'll get a taste of that next year when that expanded Club World Cup starts, because Urawa Reds are going to be there, bringing with them hundreds, if not thousands, of Japan's loudest and rowdiest supporters. Enjoy that. But there is the title chase is always competitive, and the pro rel dogfight is always super competitive. From this season now, so the J1 has largely been in 18 teams, except for 2021 because of the pandemic. But from this season, all 3 leagues are at 20. All 3 divisions are at 20. So 3 up, 3 down. No pro rel playoff. It's just from the J2, winner goes up, second place goes up, 3rd through 6th have a playoff, and that winner goes up. And in the J1, bottom 3 go down. If you're in 18th place, there's nothing saving you. So it's going to be super competitive, and it's going to be, especially over a longer season, it's going to be tough. And there is more parity across the league. So I think that sort of does make it more competitive in some ways. The league is trying to figure out how to develop super clubs that are more capable of competing at the continental level, competing at the global level. The J League wants 2 Japanese clubs in every Club World Cup going forward. So basically, in every 4-year cycle, they want a Japanese club to win the Champions League twice.
Half, essentially.
Basically, yeah. They want, they'd love to see not just Urawa, but Yokohama or Vissel or Kawasaki Frontale in the US next year. I'd love it. Hey, if that happens, if anyone wants to hire me to help cover J League clubs at the Club World Cup, my DMs are open. But like, it's I think that MLS, like, you look at the whole thing with the US Open Cup and how that's been handled. Like,
Well, MLS is interesting because even the whole Messi tour across the
Right.
globe, it feels like a circus. And
It is a circus. No,
yeah, and I'm sure there are teams that take it very seriously, and like Philadelphia is one of them. Got to give them props. LAFC has been highly competitive. They've been trying to
yep.
do their, but they're trying to win the Conca Champions League, or now Concacaf Champions Cup. They changed the name. Orlando City in a competitiveness. I don't think they do a good job with the community, but they're trying to build a team. Trying, but
Right.
then yeah, you have the Inter Miami's that become just a
Like,
circus with Messi as the main
look,
attraction.
I look at Inter Miami. I look at how much of a disaster this recent tour was, and it's like it's the same mistakes that Vissel Kobe made when they brought on Podolski and Iniesta and Villa. It's just about they're trying to sell shirts, they're trying to sell merch, they're trying to sell tickets, but you can't build a club, you can't build a team and an organization around that. Like you can, yes, you can look at Iniesta's legacy as a positive in that he did bring the club a lot of attention and sort of give them an opportunity to do more with that. But what you have to look at with what Miami are doing right now is what's their post Messi plan. And I don't think they have one right now. Like Vissel, for better or for worse, have proven that they had a post Iniesta plan because he barely played in 2022. And, he played the most minutes he got in 2023 was that send off game that they played with Barcelona, which was, another sort of dumb stunt. But, they proved that they could win without Iniesta convincingly. Like, without a doubt, Vissel Kobe deserved to be J1 champions. So I think that, it is a different management philosophy. I think that MLS clubs are willing to just throw money at things and bring in the big names because they feel like that's what you need to market soccer in the US. And whether or not that's the case, I mean, in Japan, like we're playing a different game here. Like we don't necessarily need to convince casuals to show up, like just to watch Iniesta play, because the level of play in the J League is already great, and the atmosphere is already great, and the match day experience is already great. Like yes, you have to convince casuals to come, but like they don't need Beckham, they don't need Messi. Like if a J League club tried to sign Messi, I would actually like prefer they not. Quite frankly, the Iniesta circus was enough. And like you look at in MLS and how fans are being priced out of these games involving Inter Miami, and it's just like the scalpers, the secondary market, and everything. It's just not sustainable. Like again, they're making the same mistakes that Vissel made.
Yeah, it feels like MLS is still caught up in the David Beckham era where they
Mhm.
brought in Beckham to really change the league, and it helped a lot. Beckham was a massive bump for the league.
Right.
But the thing is, it's time for you to change, and like we don't need these superstars anymore. What we need is to make the most competitive product possible in United States soccer. And if Messi is part of it, even better. Even better. But it can't be that because it became Messi league soccer at this point. Which again, it's cool that Messi's here, but it just becomes a circus. Like we said, the whole world tour and their purpose becomes to cash in. So I had a big issue with Messi doing a world tour. I was like, why don't you just make a US tour so people can watch him in the US so you can help
Mhm.
popularize the league? No, we can make more money in Saudi Arabia, in Japan. We're not
Yep.
going to, Hong Kong, which was a disaster. They had to refund the fans in Hong Kong. That's a different story.
Yeah,
So,
like that's. I mean, I totally agree with you. Like they went for the places where they could sell the most pink shirts, and
essentially, yes.
what I would like what I was really disappointed in, I wrote this in my newsletter last week. If and like you could tell that like MLS had nothing to do with this tour. Like we don't have to. I've seen some online chatter blaming MLS for making a joke out of this, but like MLS didn't have anything to do with it. This was all Inter Miami and their local tour promoters trying to grift as many fans as possible out of these insane ticket prices. If the club had been serious, they would have used that tour as a way to promote MLS overseas in areas where it doesn't really have as much exposure. Like MLS has no exposure in Japan. Obviously,
But
fans can.
but don't you think that a league that's not number one in its own country should probably focus on becoming the number one in their own country before they even consider overseas views.
Look, you can walk and chew gum at the same time. I understand where you're coming from, but like I see there's nothing wrong with expanding your market, having your clubs develop relationships with overseas clubs. You know, did you know that DC United had a partnership with Machida Zelvia at some point?
I did not.
When Machida, like 2010, when Machida Zelvia were still in the JFL. DC they had an MOU. I don't think anything came of it, but like those are relationships that clubs should be building. The J League has a ton of relationships within Southeast Asia because that's where the league is trying to market itself more. So they have tie-ups with the Thai, Vietnamese, Malaysians, Indonesian leagues. The individual clubs have relationships with clubs in Southeast Asia where they do youth exchanges and they'll send coaches and they'll bring players over here to train with the academy teams and turn that into content, sponsorships, everything else. Like there is so much happening. Like I think that I understand your perspective on that because I think that soccer has been, soccer is still in many ways fighting for market share in the States. And I understand that there is a feeling where you feel like you need to fight for that space, but soccer is also a global game, and creating those relationships will help you and will help your clubs in the long term if they can figure out how to leverage it. Like if an MLS club signed a deal with a J League club and did youth exchanges, sent staff to Japan to see how their academies are set up, sent staff to Japan to look at the high school system and how that's set up, and that club sent staff to the States to learn marketing and how they're doing, social media and how they're doing match day activations. Like there's stuff that can be learned from both sides. I think that if you were to combine Major League Soccer's marketing acumen, better for worse, sometimes, yes. But if you were to combine the marketing and the commercial side with the J League's youth development and the technicals and, the pitch side of things, you would have one of the best leagues in the world. I still believe, I say that and I believe it. They are two sides of what could be a very shiny coin.
Yeah, I think also when you talk about that, if the Brazilian league had good marketing, it would probably be among the best in the world too in terms of viewership, just because of like the abundance of quality. But that's off topic there.
I mean, better marketing, better governance, everything. I mean, this
Yeah.
whole thing with Santos and Viva Re Nagasaki, like that's been insane. But that's a story for another time.
Yes, the Brazilian league. If we talk about that, it'll go for 5 hours here. So anyhow, I haven't watched the J League. I can't really put an honest opinion about it. I think MLS has grown quite a bit, but I think MLS has all the issues you mentioned of competitiveness. At times, it doesn't feel like as competitive as it should be. And before we close, the main thing I would say about MLS, they put the salary cap and they put the DP rule, all of that to keep parity in the league. And I think MLS has good parity among the teams, but MLS has the most unbalanced rosters in the world by design. Clubs spend a ton of money on forwards, attackers, midfielders, and then very often the defense is neglected. You get bad defending by design with great players. Sometimes you'll have Messi facing a former, like a guy that just played in NCAA, like a guy that didn't have that development to play against one of the greatest players to ever play the game. Whether he's past his prime or not, it doesn't matter. He just won a World Cup. So things like that. There's parity among the teams, but the rosters are so unbalanced. You have a guy making 15 million, 10 million a year, and then a guy making like 90K a year, which again, it's good money, but I'm just saying the gap is so big. But everyone, Dan Orlowitz, make sure to go follow him on Twitter. His handle is right below his head right there near his chest. Fantastic guy. We had him here at the channel before. Knows American soccer, knows Japanese soccer.
And I will say, again, I mentioned that the J League season is about to start. Watch the J League. They their their international YouTube channel is streaming 4 games around for free.
Mhm.
You can go watch that. In the near future, like in March, April, we have a lot of 2 p.m. kickoffs, 1 or 2 p.m. kickoffs local time. So, you have to stay up a bit late if you're on the East Coast, but hey, if you're on the West Coast, pop open a beer and watch some, 9 p.m. soccer on a Friday night. Like, what's better than that?
I'm gonna start watching a few games here and there. I'll be in touch with you because I wanna. I'm not. I'm obviously can't watch it every week because I have other games to cover. But I want to try to catch a game or two every month, and just to get a feeling of what's going on there, since it's something I'm just personally
Yeah.
a personal project actually.
I think that it's an amazing league at not just on in the first division, but you go down there. There's great football, there's great soccer happening across the league, and it's only going to keep getting better.
All right, everyone. Thank you very much for watching. Drop a like before you go, and have a great day. Bye bye.